Chapter 7 Friends of the Round Table. Camelot Heights are located in the northern part of the kingdom, and the city of Camelot was in its center, flanked by Sherwood Forest on one side and Eden on the other. Ben had made good on his promise and had been traveling all day with Merlin and Artie in the royal carriage, with a retinue of servants and footmen following behind in a regular coach. Ben decided not to use the usual king-size motorcade since Camelot's roads were too rough for cars, as most of its residents traveled by horse-drawn vehicles. As soon as they set off, the old wizard was already snoring in the back seat, but Artie was awake and excited, trying out all the features of the carriage interior and playing with the sunroof, sliding it open and closed on a whim. "Dad won't let us update our carriage," he explained as he put on road-canceling headphones. Carriage travel was notoriously loud due to wheel rumble, and eagerly flipped through every channel offered on the television screen installed above the back bench. Ben settled in, amused, and let Artie have his fun. The journey from Ordon City was a long one, taking them up to Summerlands and past Snow White's castle, where they would stop for the night before making their way into the Enchanted Wood, then across the river through acres of forest lands, and finally into Camelot. Ben tried to relax in his seat, and sent a few texts to Mal to let her know he was thinking of her. No luck. She wasn't responding, and so he closed his eyes and tried to rest. A few hours after Ben, Merlin, and Artie left Snow White's palace the next morning, King Arthur's castle crested high on the hill, proud and tall, its red towers glowing in the sun. "Home," said Artie excitedly. "Looks like they knew we were coming." The turrets were flying both the Pendragon banner and Ben's beast head sigil. "I sent Archimedes ahead with the news so they could prepare," said Merlin, meaning his pet owl. He put his rumpled wizard's hat back on his head and scratched his beard. "What in Oridon is going on here?" he said as the castle gates opened for the royal entourage. Ben yawned and took a look outside the window. The entire courtyard was filled with tents and crudely constructed shelters. "Is it always this crowded here?" he asked as they disembarked. "No," said an irritated Merlin, stepping off the carriage and, in his haste, stumbling over his robes. "Something must have happened." Artie jumped down and Ben followed, eager to stretch his legs after this long ride. They were greeted by quite a sight and odor. The scent of roasting meat and smoke filled the air as people huddled around unruly fire pits. The people of Camelot preferred to live as they always had, and eschewed many modern conveniences, all well and good, thought Ben, except a little deodorant never hurt anyone. It smelled like the Middle Ages in here. "It looks like the villagers have moved from their homes to seek protection behind the castle walls," said Merlin, frowning. "The creature must have struck again," he muttered under his breath. "Make way for the king! Make way!" Ben's royal guards ordered, clearing a path through the crowd to the entrance to the palace. "King Ben!" the people cheered as Ben bowed their heads and women curtsied. "The king of Oridon has come," he heard people whisper. "Hope has arrived at last." He waved back cheerfully, trying to ignore the nerves fluttering underneath his confident smile. His subjects depended on him, and now he understood why his father had always projected strength and self-assurance. Apparently, it wasn't as easy as he had made it seem. "This way," said Merlin, when they were inside the castle proper, where the great hall was also teeming with people lying in bedrolls and hay. The castle's Lord Chamberlain rushed to meet them. He bowed to Ben and whispered in Merlin's ear. "They have prepared rooms for you in the East Wing," Merlin said. "Arthur apologizes that he is not here to welcome you, but he is still out in the countryside urging his people to head to the safety of Camelot, and expects to be delayed for quite some time. He hopes that in his place you shall meet with his knights, who are aware of the latest developments in the situation." "Thank you," said Ben. "Please tell Arthur no apologies are necessary, and I look forward to speaking with his men." "Sire, shall I go ahead and unpack and prepare your wardrobe?" asked Lumiere, who was traveling with Ben as his personal valet. The old Frenchman looked askance at the unwatched hordes and was probably wishing they were all back in Oridon's much more comfortable palace right now. "Please do," said Ben, as Merlin and Artie took their leave. "Shall I set out the royal armor, sire?" asked Lumiere, meaning the old-fashioned metal one that was once his father's. "We brought it out of storage. It's polished and oiled." "No need, I think," said Ben, inwardly grimacing at the thought of putting on the tin-can suit. "I might be in Camelot, but I am the king of this century, not the 12th. "Yes, very good, sire," said Lumiere with a smile as bright as candlesticks in the dark. Ben chose to wear the same royal blue suit he'd worn to his coronation, with the gold emballets and Oridon's crest on the sleeves. Lumiere had polished his traveling crown, so he looked and felt very much the king of Oridon as he was welcomed to the legendary Round Table, where Camelot's knights had gathered. The room itself was rather plain, with unadored stone walls and dim lighting, but Ben couldn't help but feel excited when he pulled up a heavy wooden chair at one of the most famous tables in history. The knights were a good-natured, chivalrous bunch, and Ben felt right at home in their company as they chatted about the latest pro-tourney scores. But the discussion took a serious turn when Merlin called the meeting to order, and talk soon became heated as they argued about how best to deal with the creature plaguing their land. "Yesterday the thing set fire to the forest, creating such a blaze that it almost reached Sherwood," a young knight said indignantly. "We need to destroy it before it destroys anything else. Too many people have lost their farms and houses to this thing." "And another," said another. Good that Merlin is back. He can use his magic to capture it." "Ahem," said Merlin, polishing his glasses with the edge of his long sleeve. "Unfortunately, we don't have permission from the king to do so. King Ben, I mean." Ben looked around the table at their distressed faces and cleared his throat. "As you know, it is our belief that the use of magic at this level can be dangerous, and so I'm here to observe the situation before we decide to change the policies that have kept Oridon safe and peaceful so long." "You know what's dangerous? That creature! That's dangerous," cried a knight. "Sneaks around in the dark of night, taking livestock and setting fire to everything before disappearing in a cloud of smoke." "Merlin tells me that no one in Camelot has actually seen this creature," Ben asked. "Is that still true?" The knights shuffled in their seats and glanced at each other nervously. "Well, sort of," said the knight on Ben's left. "It's dark," was one excuse. "It's fast," was another. "But if we don't know what we're fighting, how can we prepare to fight against it?" Ben said. "We can't chase after shadows and smoke. We have to know exactly what it is that's attacking your lands. You have my deepest sympathies and every resource I can offer from Oridon. But before I can allow Merlin to use magic, I need to know exactly what we're up against." Heads nodded around the table as the knights digested Ben's words. Merlin had Archimedes perched on his shoulder, and the owl trained its bright eyes on Ben as it whispered in Merlin's ear. "The king makes a fair point," said Merlin at last. "We must lay eyes on this creature before we can conceive how to stop it." Artie, who had been quietly listening in the corner until now, spoke up. "Dad said he saw a bunch of tracks in the forest by the river's edge near Eden," he said. "Maybe we should set up camp there tonight and see if we can spot it." "Excellent idea," said Ben, who admired the boy's pluck. "We will camp tonight." The royal entourage, along with Ben, Merlin, Artie, and a handful of knights, established temporary barracks in a clearing by the shore. Every night they waited for any sign of the creature, but 2 days passed and they didn't see smoke or fire, let alone any sort of mysterious beast emerging from the woods. On the third evening, Ben scoured the river's shoreline, hoping that the creature would finally make an appearance. He was still unsure about allowing Merlin to use magic, and he knew the old wizard was growing impatient. King Arthur was still abroad, warning his people to find shelter, although he couldn't be too pleased to have his castle overrun by his subjects. But Camelot's monster wasn't Ben's only problem. It was Castle coming on Saturday at Oridon Prep, and he really wanted to play the tourney game and take Mal to the dance. and he was disappointed that it looked like he wouldn't make it back in time. But that was the boy in him speaking. The king's place was here in Camelot, at the edge of the forest, waiting for a creature to appear from the shadows. In the wee hours of the morning, Ben was asleep in his tent when he heard a boy scream. "It's here! It's here!" cried Artie. "It's a dragon!" Ben dashed out of his tent and looked up at the sky, where, sure enough, a huge purple dragon was roaring, sending massive fireballs down to their camp and setting trees ablaze. He felt his heart stop in his chest, for his worst fears had been realized. He had seen such a dragon only once before.